I wanted to describe the typical deer hunting neighbor that you may encounter. And, in the end, I go to a lot of clients, a lot of people, visit with a lot of people, and people talk about the XYZ type of neighbor, and we're listing some here, and how they can't have good property because of these neighbors. And I look at it like most neighbors are good neighbors unless they're doing something illegally. You can learn to work with all different kinds of neighbors, and we're going to talk about that. Because in the hunting community, it's always best to get along. That does not mean that you let people take advantage of you. And but outside of that, we want to be able to get along. We're in the hunting community. It's a shrinking community, unfortunately. And I want to discuss some of these neighbors and some of the problems you might encounter. Deer hunter neighbors, fence sitters, people that are right on the line. What I found is when you have people sitting on the line and they're hunting, use them to your advantage. They're obviously not accessing through your land to get to that fence line. They're accessing all the way through their land or alongside their land to get to yours, which in turn, most of the time spooks out their land, pushes deer onto your land, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Again, it might seem bad. The worst thing that you could do is go into your woods or land 50, 100 yards and go around them, and in essence, give that land to them. And I'd rather see you, if they're coming into that line, you access along that line. We have a new property we're looking at. There's a pretty active stand location right on the edge, and that's going to be one of our access points. As opposed to me going through the middle of my property to access that side of the land, it'll be a lot better to access right along the line and use that line anyways. And so they're probably not going to want to sit on that fence line. I'm not sitting on the fence line, and you can sit on it. It's legal. It doesn't really matter to me. But there are ways that can actually be a good thing. Brown it's down neighbors. This is one I hear all the time. These are brown it's down. These are the ones that are hurting my hunt. And actually what I find is those brown it's down neighbors, meaning those neighbors that will shoot anything that moves, are typically moving around the property. They're shooting everything that moves. They're making a big commotion. And over a 10, 15, 20 year period, they're really not shooting a high percentage of the local best bucks, whatever that age class is, whether it's a 2 or 3 year old buck, on average a 4, 5, 6 year old buck, because of that mentality where they're just going out and having fun and shooting, and there's nothing wrong with that, again, then they're going to oftentimes help you a lot more than they hurt you. Really think about that. Just because I think a lot of times people look at it like they don't have the same ideals that I do, they're not passing up the same bucks that I do, so they must be bad. And that's not the case. Use that to your advantage, just like someone sitting on a fence. It might appear bad to begin with, and when in the end it's really not, and they could actually be doing more help for you than actual harm. Loud and obnoxious. These are great too. We talked about a neighbor that we might have coming up on a very small piece. The thought was they'd put a redneck blind on the property, drive an ATV to it, and boy, by that time they've already spooked the deer off the property. They're spooking them onto our property. We're accessing along that long skinny line anyways to get in and out of the land. So a neighbor like that, yeah, you might not like hearing their ATV coming in. You might not like hearing them shut the door on their blind, seeing them close to the property boundary. But again, a guy that goes back to the brown it's down, they're not going to get a high percentage of the area bucks. And in the end, so what? It's their property. They can do whatever they want. But you might find that they're going to help you a lot more than they hurt you. Great hunters. That's another thing too. You have neighbors that seem to shoot all the bucks. I want you to be that neighbor. I want to be that neighbor. I want to be the one that is taking advantage of the local age structure of bucks, whatever that might be, and trying to get a good representation of the bucks within the area. Not a bad thing, because just learn how to hunt better. Look at what they're doing consistently and then match it on your property. And what you'll find is if you're starting to mimic a lot of the tactics that are working well for them and installing on your own land, you're actually taking two parcels, the one that they're hunting on and doing a good job, and then the one that you're hunting on and you're improving to do a good job. And to me, instead of double the amount of potential in the area and success, you expand that to 3 or 4 times more, because you're each establishing a separate culture of bucks, of a deer herd, of deer movement that often overlaps a little bit, but at the same time establishes deer movements and deer patterns of different bucks, especially the older they get, the more defined they get in the range in those two areas. So always look at that example of Of course, the brown it's down, fence sitters, loud and obnoxious, and how they're not shooting a lot of deer. And then you have that great hunter. Don't get jealous over that. Look at it as an opportunity to learn and to actually improve your game. And for that, I think the entire neighborhood is better when you can mimic them, get along, do a good job, don't be jealous, and try to create that culture where there's multiple good properties in the area, not just one. Trespassers and dogs. We could have ended this one with this one, but this is where it crosses the line. You have neighbors that are allowing their dogs to run on your property. I saw an Indiana parcel this year, and I felt so bad for the guy because the neighbor has increased the number of dogs. They have 5 or 6 dogs now that they let run loose. They're running the deer off his land consistently. You know, I'm an old beagle guy. I had beagles for many years, ran a lot of rabbits, snowshoes, and they do destroy the hunting. If I wanted to go out hunting on November 15th for gun season, I certainly wouldn't let a bunch of my beagles run rabbits out there and go hunting the day before the season. Those dogs, whether they're beagles, stray dogs, neighbors' dogs, and running on your land is a very bad thing, and that has to be addressed. I encourage you to contact the local authorities, Sheriff's Department, DNR, talk to the neighbor, try to work it out, let him know it's unsafe for the dogs to run around if he cares about his dogs. But certainly it has to be addressed because it can destroy your land, and of course trespassers. What I find with trespassers and those dogs that are running around is those problems, unless addressed aggressively and really purposefully with those individuals, it's just going to create an ever-expanding problem. Those people take advantage of you. You give an inch, they take a mile, and it's never going to get better. And thankfully, what I see is when you buy properties, you may have initial trespassing concerns that you have to deal with, but if you're very strict about it, you're very aggressive, you let them know you mean business, then what I find is those problems quickly diminish, and rarely do those problems ever just pick up on lands that haven't experienced those problems to begin with. Be very aggressive with it, let them know you mean business. Those cross a line you have to do something about, and most of all, you don't want them to take advantage of you. Now, you'll find that most of your neighbors are really good, and what I found is instead of saying, hey, and I've talked to people, you could tell they have an attitude towards their neighbors if they shoot a small buck. Look at it a different way. Look at it a positive way. Look at it, they shot a small buck, that means they didn't put a tag on one of the bigger bucks in the area, and that's okay. Look at it as if they're really happy. If they're truly happy to shoot that deer and they're excited about it, take pictures of them. Help them out. Help them get them out of the woods. That's not a bad thing. It's easy to get along with all of these types of neighbors. And I think what you'll find is just because they're not hunting the same way as you doesn't mean they're not helping the neighborhood. It actually could be not every property is going to be a herd influencing property. Not every property can hold mature bucks. So if people are hunting a different way than you, they have different expectations than you, that's not necessarily a bad thing. One of the things that I see with the trend of neighbors is, should you do any favors? And along with that especially comes asking for favors. What I find is if you're asking for access favors, where you want to go through someone's land to access yours, and they say, sure, we can do that. Well, the next step is, hey, I have some relatives that are hunting the fence line. If they shoot a deer, can they go on your property and retrieve it? And you say, sure, that's all right. Well, pretty soon those people are going on the land without you knowing it. You show up, you find that they gutted a deer in the middle of your food plot, and they were there, you don't see any deer, you get them on trail camera, and again, it goes back to you give an inch, they take a mile. And when you have favors that you've asked for, expect to give favors in return. What that does, it creates resentment, and all of a sudden, that little portion you thought, yeah, this is a good trade, we'll do this, and it was more one-sided towards you receiving an advantage. Well, eventually they're going to want that favor back, and you might not appreciate what they're doing to return that favor or have that favor returned to them. Create some resentment, and what I see a lot of times, all of a sudden, two neighbors that got along, they gave each other permission to do something. All of a sudden, one has enough resentment that it creates a blow up, and pretty soon you're not friends with those neighbors at all. Is it really bad to share trail cameras? To go over to someone's house for a drink, whether it's a Pepsi or a beer, pick your flavor, sit and chat for a little bit, this doesn't mean that you have to be long lost friends and do this once a week, but just keeping in touch with them, once or twice a year, if you're not in the same circles, is a great idea. And always keep in mind that if they don't do the same things you do, it's an opportunity to get to know them better. Please don't look at it and say, boy, you shot that spike, you shouldn't have done that, you shot that 2-year-old. Instead, celebrate the hunt, celebrate the harvest, and in the end, do you really need neighbors to help you? I look at it like, if you're in a good area, a good hunting area, then the neighbors should have a lot less impact on your land if you're managing and designing your hunt well. And that's truly the focus, because look at it this way. Mature bucks during the entire season on most lands only travel an average of 200 to 300 yards during daylight the entire season. That distance is within most borders of even a lot of small properties down to 20, 30, 40 acres. So if you take that perspective, you manage what you do, take care of yourself, learn how to hunt better, learn how to manage your property better, then neighbors that you perceive as, quote, bad or not on the same page with you, you'll find do not really have that great of an impact, especially a negative impact on how you hunt, your ability for herd management. And in the end, seriously, can't we all just get along? Whether you have a neighborhood picnic, get to know your neighbors in a good way. We're all hunters on the same page. Make sure you're aggressive and get rid of some of these problems that crop up, because people can take advantage of you. But bottom line, I think you'll find that most neighbors are going to help you a lot more than they hurt you, no matter what their differences of opinion are. Just enjoy the hunt, enjoy your neighbors, and have a great hunting season this year. Hey guys, I really appreciate you watching today's video. We're out here having some fun today. We're planting some switchgrass, cutting some timber, making some bedding areas, but most importantly, we're putting it all together, and that's critical. Any habitat improvements you're making, you can't just make improvements because it's a good spot. You have to link those together so that helps your hunt this fall. Really, I encourage you to check out my web classes. The link is in the description. It's helped a lot of folks design their properties and do what we're out here having fun doing right now.